In this video, I'm going to show you the new navigation components library for Android, which is part of the Jetpack library. It's a new way for developers to navigate their Android applications. And in my opinion, it's a far, far superior way, especially when we're dealing with fragments, because before there was a lot of real shortcomings when it came to fragments and how they're navigated and how you can navigate the backstack with those fragments. So basically what happens when you press the back button or back arrows in your application. So I think the Android team at Google did a really great job with this library. So now let's demo what I'm going to show you how to build in this video, and then we're going to jump into development. So on the screen here, I have this map, and this is called a navigation graph when you're talking about the navigation components library. And basically what the graph is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a graph that defines what the navigation is going to look like in the application. So you can see that there are 6 screens on the graph here. So this kind of entry screen, which is what you're seeing here. And then there's the different pathways that you can follow. So if I press the view transactions button, I'm taken to this screen. If I go back, I'm taken back to the main screen. The bottom button is the view balance button. That would take me to this screen here. And then the middle button is the send money button, where I can enter some data and send this to the next fragment. So let's give this guy a name who's going to be receiving this money. If I click next, that guy's name is passed through a bundle and passed to this new fragment, which is this one right here. So it says sending money to Mitch because I entered the name Mitch here. If I was to change this to Bill and go next, it would say sending money to Bill. So not only am I going to be showing you how to navigate the app using the graph and using fragments, but I'm also going to be showing you how to pass different data to the new fragments, because it's obviously going to be a little different because we're using a totally different way to navigate the app. So next, let's send some money to Bill. So I'm going to send Bill $60. And if I click send, once again, that is passed through the bundle to this final fragment here that says you have sent 60 to Bill. So you're going to see a lot of things here. You're going to see how to build the navigation graph, how to implement the fragments with the navigation graph, how to pass data to fragments with the navigation graph, and how to also add animations to the transitions, to the fragment transitions. So you'll notice if I go forward, I am getting that kind of sliding right animation. If I go backwards, I get that sliding left animation. So different animations for the different transitions as you either go into the app further or out of the app kind of backwards. Just as kind of a heads up, I'm going to be building this using Kotlin, and I'm going to be using AndroidX. So if you don't know Kotlin, you should still be able to follow along with the video. And if you don't know AndroidX, it's just a new way that they organize dependencies for Android. So no big deal there. And we're going to be following the documentation on this. So I'm going through a navigation guide. So developer.android.com/guide/navigation, and then navigation getting started. And this doesn't matter. So that's just this page right here. And then I'm just going to be kind of following along through this. And basically, I built this example. I couldn't find this on their Google sample, the code for it. So I looked at this and I said, okay, well, I'll use their example and I'll actually build the code for it. So just pretty much following along with exactly what they do in the guide here. So the first step is, of course, to create a new project. So I'm going to start a new Android project. I'm going to select empty activity, go to next. I'm going to call this navigation example, or what did I call it? I think it's maybe navigation components example. Navigation components example. And all the code is on GitHub, by the way. If you go to my GitHub page, you'll be able to find the code at this repository, Mitch Tabian navigation components example. You'll see that navigation graph picture down here, and all of the branches are here, although I wouldn't even bother referring to the branches. Just use the master branch and you can take a look at the code. All right, so we have our name, we have where we want it to store, the save location, we're using Kotlin, we want to use AndroidX artifacts, and the min API 21 is fine. I'm going to click finish, and Android Studio is going to build that project for me. Also, as just kind of a heads up, if you end up finishing this video and you want to see another example of how to use navigation components, you can check out my Dagger course on my website. It's completely free. Just go to codingwithmitch.com and scroll down to the front page where it says Dagger 2.2 on Android. If you click here, you just got to register for the course and you can start watching it. It's completely free. So if you don't know how to use Dagger, that's a good one to watch. And also I use navigation components in that course, so you get to see another example of how to use it. Okay, so once Android Studio has built your project, we are ready to get started. It's telling me that I need to update Kotlin, but I'm going to do that another time. I don't need to do that right now. So the first step, as always, is to get the dependencies. And we can get the dependencies from the navigation or the Jetpack section of the Android documentation. So I'm at Jetpack, AndroidX, releases, navigation, and then I'm down to the section declaring dependencies. So actually we only need one. We just need this one right here. So I'm copying def define version Kotlin 2.1.0 alpha 06. I'm going to go into the build.gradle app file, going to paste that down below. Now I'm going to go back to the documentation and I'm going to grab the Kotlin dependencies right here. So back to Android Studio, pasting those in, and there is the dependencies that we need for this video. Oh, we do actually need one more for some styling. I think it's for, I can't remember what I used it for, but I think it's for styling on buttons or something like that. So I'm just going to type define material version 1.1.0- alpha 07. Like I said, I can't remember what I use this for, but we're going to encounter it in a minute here when we actually get to making the layouts. But just write this in. It'll be com.google.android.material :material, and then I can reference that version. So colon again, $material version. So there we go. That should be all the dependencies that we're going to need. I'm going to press sync. I don't believe there's anything we need for the project file. I think it's just we need the Google Maven repository. So let's take a look in here. We have Google, we have JCenter, that's good. We have the Kotlin plugin. Yeah, that should be good. The other one that the other dependency that the documentation recommends is using safe arguments, which is basically it'll just give you a way to declare the type of argument, so the data type of the argument that you're going to be passing through a bundle. So if you want to include that, you can. It just, like I said, all it will do is say if you want to send an integer through the bundle, you can say, yes, I'm sending an integer. Or if you're sending a string, you can say, you can define that you're going to send a string. If it's recommended, definitely in production, if you're going to use this, it'll help to catch errors when they happen or if you accidentally use the wrong data type. But in this video, I'm going to be using them out and just focusing on the navigation alone. So now it's time to actually define what the navigation is going to look like. And as you saw from the navigation kind of diagram that I had showing in the beginning of the video, we're going to have 6 screens, and you saw them in the demo. You have one with 3 buttons at the start, and then that'll take you to that screen, bottom will take you to that screen, and then so on. You get the picture. Now, so at this point, we want to define this inside of Android Studio. So this is called the navigation graph. Everything in this example is going to kind of revolve around this thing called the navigation graph. So how do you create this navigation graph? Well, I'm going to right click on the res directory, go to new. I want to go to new Android resource file, and I can select resource type, go to navigation, and this will generate a navigation directory, and it will also generate a file where we can define the navigation graph. So it's going to be called nav_graph. Now I'm going to click OK, and Android Studio is going to generate that directory and also that navigation graph for me. So now in here, I would define kind of the navigation for the application. But because we don't have any fragments yet, that's what we need to do next. Because once we have the fragments, we can build this navigation graph and kind of, essentially we want to build this screen. It's going to look exactly like this. Once we have the fragments, we can build the map. So here's the graph. Now let's make those fragments. So there's going to be 6 fragments in the video, as I talked about, and I'm going to create them all in the main package directory. So right click on the main package directory, go into new. Hopefully you can see this on my screen yet. You should be able to just barely see that. I'm going down to fragments and I'm selecting fragment blank. So this is just going to be, it's going to generate a fragment for me and it's going to generate a layout file for me. I don't want to include the factory methods. I don't want to include the interface methods. It's going to be as basic as it gets. Just going to be a fragment and its layout. So the first one is going to be main fragment. I'm going to click finish and Android Studio is going to generate that for me. I don't need any of the builder stuff. I don't need the parameters. I don't need any, whoops, I deleted too much there. I want to just delete those. I just like the most basic you can possibly get. And now I want to do the same thing with the other 5 fragments. So right clicking, going to new, going to fragment, blank fragment. This one's going to be called view transaction fragment. Again, I want to generate the layout, but I don't want anything else. Click finish. Now delete these parameters. As soon as Android Studio is done building this, Not sure why it wouldn't let me delete it. Now generating another new fragment. So another blank fragment. This one's going to be choose recipient fragments. If I spelt that right, recipient. Don't need any of this. Finish. Okay, let's delete these comments again and those two declarations. Right click again, another new fragment, blank fragment. This one's going to be choose. No, I just did that one. View balance fragment. Did I type that right? Looks good. View balance fragment. Finish. Let Android Studio build that for me. As soon as it's done, delete everything at the top. Right click, another new one. You're getting very good at this by now. We've already created 4, so just 2 more. So specify amount fragment. Again, unclick these, finish, delete the comments and the declarations. And the last one, right click, new fragment, blank fragment. This one's going to be confirmation fragment. And unclick these 2 and finish. So now to save time, I'm just going to copy and paste the layouts into the project. So I'm opening up Res, opening up the layouts, and I'm just going to copy paste in all of these layouts. So we have, I'll just open them all: fragment chooser, fragment confirmation, fragment main, view balance, view transaction. And I'm going to change all the tabs, close the preview. So I'm going to the text tab, closing the project here, so it gives me some more room. Going to the text tab, going to the text tab. And now I'm going to go to the GitHub page. So the GitHub, the code for the project. I have the master branch selected, and I'm going to grab the code for all of those layouts. I don't really see the point in typing this out on video. The point of this is to show you the navigation graph, the navigation components library, not the layouts. So first is activity main. I think this is actually pretty much empty. This is just part of the fragment setup. Activity main is the only activity in the project. So we want to put this fragment declaration inside of activity main, because that's what's going to be inflated, and that's going to it's going to reference the navigation graph right here. So notice the attribute app nav graph, and it references that navigation graph that I created, and I have it a default nav host set to true. So this is very important. It means that this activity is referencing a navigation graph. So it's basically delegating all of its navigation code to the navigation graph. That's what it means. So I'm copying all of that, going into Android Studio. I'm going to open activity main, go to the text tab, and I'm going to copy or select all and paste that in. So right now there should be kind of nothing showing because we don't have anything basically. So let's get the rest of those layouts. Let's go to GitHub, go to the next fragment, which is fragment choose recipient. Did I spell that right? Yeah, recipient. I'm going to copy all of the code, go right down to the bottom, copy that, go to Android Studio, look for fragment choose recipient, which is this one. Select all and paste it in. Nothing fancy here. Let's just take a quick look at this. Choose recipient fragment. Did I not spell that right? Oh, I said chooser. Let's rename that to, so I'm right clicking, refactor, rename this to choose recipient fragment. And that means that the layout is also named incorrectly. So right clicking on that, going to refactor, going to rename. This should be fragment choose recipient, refactor that. So nothing fancy here, just some basic layouts. I'm not even going to bother explaining it because there's really nothing special about that. So let's go to GitHub and get the next one, which is fragment confirmation. Again, copying the whole thing, going back to Android Studio, fragment confirmation, pasting that in. No spelling mistakes this time. Grabbing the next fragment, fragment main. This is the main fragment, the one that's going to be inflated right away when they launch the application. So copying that again, all that, pasting it in. That's going to be this main screen right here. Going to GitHub, I'm going to grab the next one, fragment specify amount. So let's copy the whole thing. Go back to Android Studio, paste that one in. Nothing too fancy here, just accepting an amount, and there's a send button. Go back, and there's 2 left. Fragment view balance is the next one. Copy that, back to Android Studio. I can close this preview. Fragment specify amount. Am I missing it? No, or which one was it? It was fragment view balance. Fragment view balance, select all, paste it in. Next, and the last one, I know you can't wait. Fragment view transaction. We're almost done. So copying all of this, all this stuff, fragment view transaction, and pasting that in. So there is all of our screens. if you're getting any kind of an error like it looks like I am right here, this shouldn't be happening because the ID is right there. If you get any kind of an error, just rebuild the project and that should take care of it. It sometimes happens when you copy paste in code. I don't know what it is about the Android Studio that isn't able to read things when you copy and paste it in, but just rebuild and it should take care of those errors. Well, it's still showing as red, but everything is aligned correctly, so it must be reading in. So I'm going to assume it's okay. So now I'm going to close everything and we can work on the next part. So this is probably the coolest thing about the navigation components library, this thing that we're going to work on next. Now that we have all of the fragments, and in activity main we have a fragment declaration that you saw, and it has an attribute navigation graph pointing to that navigation graph that we created. It says default nav host equal to true. Now the coolest part, as I said, is we're going to define the relationships inside the navigation graph. So you can either do this with text, just like if you were defining like an XML layout, but the design tab is actually really useful here. So what you can do is go up to this little plus sign here, and I can choose like a relationship to set up. So the first one is fragment main. This is kind of the very first fragment in our graph. That's going to be the one for this main screen here. So I'm adding that one. Now I want to add the other fragments. So I'm just going to add them all in, and then I'm going to draw the lines. So choose destination fragment. Whoops. Choose recipient fragment. Sorry. I'm just going to add them all in and then arrange them. Fragment confirmation. Fragment main, we already got that. Choose recipient, we got that. Fragment specify amount. Fragment view balance, and the last one is fragment view transaction. So now let's actually zoom out a little bit because I'm a little close here. We're going to get main fragment here. Just taking a look at our image, we have main fragment, we have view balance fragment at the bottom, and view transaction fragment at the top. So view transaction fragments going to the top. Specify amount fragments over here, choose recipient, and this is confirmation and view balance. So we have this is what our navigation graph should look like, and which is exactly what you see in the picture. You have the main fragment, choose recipient, which goes to specify amount, which goes to the confirmation. You have view balance at the bottom and view transactions at the top. So this is cool. I love this. I love being able to look at this and visually see what the navigation of my app should look like. And now the coolest part is I can just draw arrows. So I can like take this, drag it to that. I can take it again. If I can click it, let's zoom in because I don't seem to be able to click this. Oh, the problem is you got to click on the fragment and then you can drag it up. Okay, there we go. So click that, drag it down. Now click this, drag to that, click this, and drag to that. So not only do you get like a really cool little visual thing here, is now that will obviously generate the XML required for you. So if I go over to the text tab, I now have all this XML that's been generated for me. And this looks really intimidating when you look at it at first, but once you get kind of familiar with how this works, it's actually really cool and it's really logical, and it makes things really easy. Like I said, I really like the navigation, this whole graph system that they're defining. So as I mentioned probably a minute or two ago, one of the other core components of using this navigation system is something called the navigation host. So that's this fragment that I added to the layout of activity main. You have to define what view or what activity is hosting your navigation graph. So that's what this fragment's all about. You give it an ID, you give it a name, so AndroidX navigation fragment, NavHostFragment. This is very important. You must have this added to it. You can set it to occupy the entire view, obviously, and then set the default nav host to true, and then set it to a navigation graph. So you're inserting a fragment, telling it that it subclasses the NavHostFragment class, telling it that it's a default navigation host, and then referencing a graph so it knows what to do. So all this is done in XML. Very, very cool. Next, the next thing is the navigation graph, which you just saw. So now in here, we want to define how these fragments are going to be navigated. So just like any other application, we need a way to initiate the transactions. So how do we do that? Because right now we have our graph, we know what the navigation is going to look like, but which one of these buttons initiates, this line? Which one of these buttons initiates this line? Which one initiates the top? That's the next part. We need to do the same thing we always do, attach OnClick listeners to the buttons, but we need to have those button clicks reference the navigation graph. So that's going to be the next task. And with the navigation components library, all of this is done using something called a NavController. So you might be thinking that we should set up this NavController thing in main activity, but actually we're going to be setting it up in main fragment because main activity is delegating everything to the navigation graph. You don't have to do anything in main activity. It's essentially just taken completely out of the equation. Once you add this fragment and tell it that it's a NavHostFragment, you don't even need to do anything. So main activity, we will doing absolutely nothing in. But main fragment is the first one in the navigation graph. So that's the one that we need to start with. And so first, let's implement the OnClick listener interface because we know we're going to need to be detecting clicks. So view.onClick listener. It's going to tell me that I need to import the onClick method. So Alt Enter, implement members, get the onClick method. And I personally like to move my override methods to the bottom. Some I like to leave on the top, but the onClick I definitely like to put on the bottom. So I'm just cutting that and putting it on the bottom. No real reason for that, just something I like to do. Now we need to define something known as a NavController. So NavController. You can see that the autocomplete is giving me some suggestions there. So var NavController is going to be of type NavController. It can be null, which I'm going to set it to null just to start. And then as soon as the activity view is created, I want to instantiate that NavController because the navigation is going to be tied around and revolving around this navigation controller object. So I'm pressing Control O and I'm going to get the onViewCreated method. So there it is right there. And now inside onViewCreated, I want to go NavController equals navigation.findNavController, and then I want to reference the view. So that's going to instantiate my NavController, which is going to have a reference to the navigation graph. That's the cool thing. So automatically now it has a reference to the view, and it has because it has a reference to the view, which is fragment main, which exists inside my nav graph. Now my navigation controller has a reference to that navigation graph, and now I can use that. So first I want to attach onClick listeners to all of the buttons inside of this view. So find view by ID. This is going to be a button. Got to import the button. r.id.viewTransactions button. Set onClick listener. Reference. Oops, that was the wrong onClick listener. Reference this. Now I'm going to press Control D 2 times because we need to attach 2 more onClick listeners. This is going to be the send money button. This one's going to be the view balance button, and they all just have onClick listeners attached to them. So again, this is this screen right here: view transactions button, view money, send money button, and the view balance button. That's these 3. So now inside of the onClick method, I want to do a when statement, which is the Kotlin version of a Java switch statement. I want to say when the view cannot be null, first of all. So this view cannot be null. And now I want to add cases to the statement. So r.id, if it's the view transactions button, then I want to reference my navigation controller, which cannot be null, and I want to call navigate, the method navigate. And I want to reference the fragment or the navigation component that I want to execute. So inside here, this is kind of a bit of a confusing part. So inside of this first part right here, it has 3 arrows, 3 potential places it could go. And these are called actions. So that's what these 3 actions are right here. So which one of these actions do I want to use? Well, let's take a look at our main fragment. If I click the View Transactions button, where do I want to go? I want to go to this fragment. Well, what is that fragment? Let's take a look at the graph. I want to go from main fragment to View Transactions fragment. So if I look here, the ID for the action is main fragment to View Transactions fragment. So this is the ID of the action. So I want to reference that action. So I copied that, and I want to reference it right here. So it's defining where you want to go through an action from the navigation graph. And if that's confusing to you, don't worry, it'll just do it a couple times and it's going to make sense to you. You just look at this and look where we're going. We're going from main fragment to choose recipient fragment, from main fragment to view transactions fragment, or from main fragment to view balance fragment. And then those transactions are defined by these different IDs. So that's all this is going to be. So the second one is going to be send money button. And the third one is going to be view balance button. So this one is going to be action main fragment to the send money button, main fragment to, no, this ID isn't right. It should be from main fragment to, it's choose recipient. That's why. Action main fragment to choose recipient. And then this one is action main fragment to the view balance fragment. And that's it. That sets up the navigation for the first fragment. Pretty cool, pretty simple. And the cool thing about it is that the backstack is automatically kind of handled. So you know if you use the previous fragment version, that can get really complicated and doesn't really work perfectly all the time when you have like a big application. So this is still kind of a simple example, but as we work on the rest of the fragments, you'll see that it gets really, really simple. So at this point, I'm going to run it and let's just test and see if those first fragment transactions are working. All right, so here we have the app on the screen. There's view transactions, that's working. Back button takes me back. Send money, that's working. View balance. So all of those transactions are working correctly. Now I'm going to work on the rest of the transactions. So inside the navigation graph, I want to define what happens inside of this fragment because we need to navigate there. So I need to set up what happens if they click the next button or the cancel button. Same with here. What happens if they hit the send button or the cancel button? And then in here, it's just the back button. So that's fine. So we need to go into choose recipient fragment and specify amount fragment and attach some OnClick listeners. All right, so let's go into which one first? I guess choose recipient fragment. So choose recipient fragment. And again, I want to implement the OnClick listener interface. Go over here, implement the members, OnClick, get that. I'm going to cut that, put it at the bottom. Going to delete that comment. We obviously don't need that. And we're going to do the same thing. So create a var NavController. So NavController, it can be null because I'm going to set it to null. Now I'm going to insert the onViewCreated method. OnViewCreated. Down here, I want to instantiate the view controller, or the NavController, just like we did before. So navigation, find NavController, referencing the view, find view by ID, attaching an OnClick listener to the r.id.next button, set OnClick listener. Again, what's the wrong one? That was one that takes a function. And copy that line with Control D. This one is going to be the cancel button. So get in that cancel button and give myself some more room here. Now inside of OnClick, eventually when we get towards the end of this video, we're going to need to pass the name of the user through the bundle to the next fragment. But for now, I just want to work on, setting the OnClick listeners. So going back to here, and then later we'll come back and do all the bundle stuff. But for now, just strictly the OnClick listeners is what we're going to work on. So view is not null. So get the ID. Then I want to do r.id.next button is the first one. And I'm going to do some curly braces here because later we're going to be adding some stuff. But for now, I'm just calling the NavController. It cannot be null. And I want to call the navigate method. And I'm just going to reference the action. So r.id.action, we're going from choose recipient fragment to specify amount fragment. Very simple, nothing too fancy there. And then down below that, the next case is going to be r.id.cancel button. And this is just, I want to do activity. So I'm referencing the activity through the fragment, activity, and the activity obviously can't be null. I want to call onBackPressed. So just strictly pressing the back button. The last fragment for the OnClick listeners is the, which one is it? Specify amount fragment. So we're going to be doing a lot of very similar things here. I'm going to get the OnClick listener interface again. So comma, get that. I need the NavController again, so I'm just copying that, bringing that over to, pasting in that NavController. I, of course, need the OnClick method and the onViewCreated method again. So I'm going to paste those in. Oh, looks like I copied that. Didn't quite copy that right. So onViewCreated method and the OnClick method, pasting those two in. Okay. And then I just need to change. Actually, these buttons are the same because it's going to have a next button and also a cancel button too. So that's fine, except for this action needs to change. So the action is going from specify amount fragment to confirmation fragment. And again, by the end of this video, we're going to need to pass the amount and the name through the bundle to confirmation fragment. But for now, we're not worried about the bundle. We're just getting kind of the basic navigation setup. Oh, I actually forgot one more thing before we test this. This should be send button, not the next button. So we look at the not the navigation graph. If we look at specify amount fragment, the layout for specify amount fragment, which is here, and we look at the ID for the button, it's which one is it? I'm getting confused. We're inside specify amount fragment. Yeah, so it should be the send button. That's the ID. So that's the correct ID. Now, that should be pretty much the entire navigation for the app, like the most generalized navigation. We have OnClick listeners to those buttons. We have OnClick listeners to those two buttons, the next and cancel button, the send and cancel button. So at this point, if we run it, we should be able to see the kind of the complete version of the app without the animations and also without passing things through the bundle. Okay, so let's give it a try. We'll go to send money. I'll type a name in here. It doesn't matter. Remember, nothing's being sent through the bundle yet. I'll click next. Now I can enter some amount. Again, it doesn't matter. Now I'm going to click send, and it looks like that last transaction is not working. So let's go into specify amount fragment, and I'm attaching the OnClick listener. I have I forgot to change this one to the send button also. So send button, now that should be good to go, and that should detect the click. Okay, send some money, enter a name, next, enter some money, send. There we go, $1 was sent to Mitch. That's just some default text that's showing on the view. So now that we have like kind of the bare bones, I should test the cancel button actually. That works, and that one works too. Okay, so now that we have the bare bones navigation kind of all set up, now we can add animations and then also work on passing things through the bundle, because remember the name has to get passed from choose recipient fragment to specify amount fragment. Then that name also has to get passed along with an amount of money to confirmation fragment. So first we'll work on the animations, and then we are going to come back and work on the bundle stuff. So let's close all of this. We actually don't need to have any fragment open. We do the animations. We need to add the animations, and then we can add them to the navigation graph, which is a really cool feature, I think. So let's add those animations. So I'm going to right click on the res directory, go to new directory. I'm going to call this anim, and then inside this anim folder is where I'm going to create that new animation resource file. We're going to have a fade in animation. And I'm going to actually just I'm going to create all of these, and then we're going to go to GitHub and we're going to copy all the code in. So fade out will be the next one. There's going to be 6 total. Next one's going to be slide in to the right. Now I'm going to copy that and paste it in the anim folder. This is going to be slide in left. Copy that, paste it again in here. This is going to be slide out right, and then slide out left will be the last one. Slide out left. All right, so now that I have all of those animation files created, there's a whole bunch of them here. I'm going to go to the GitHub, the code for the project. I have the master branch selected. I'm going to go to main, go to resource, go to the anim folder, and I'm going to copy all of these in. I'm actually just going to do this off camera, so I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to copy in all the code. It's just straight up copy and pasting here. So you're going to want to pause the video here, do the same thing, and then come back and we'll continue. All right, now I have all those animations copied in. You can see them up here. I'm going to close them all. You can see they're all in the animation folder. If you open any of these, they're exactly the same as you see in the master branch of the source code. So just straight up copy those in. So now that we have those, we can go into our graph and we can add the animations to the transitions or to the actions. So each one of these has an action, and each one of these actions has an ID and a destination. So we can add some animations to these actions. So we'll start with the first one here, which is from main fragment to choose recipient fragment. So I'm going to come in here, get some space, and the first one is I need to do an app pop enter animation, and then I just enter, or I reference the animation. I want to do slide into the left. And so now I need to do a bunch more for the different transitions. The next one is pop exit animation, and that's going to be slide out right. So slide out right. Next is going to be the enter animation. This is going to be slide in right. And don't worry if this is confusing to you, I'm going to explain it in just a second here. And the last one's the exit animation, which is slide out to the left. So what are these animations? What's pop and what is the ones without pop? Because that's pretty much the two kind of sets here. We have pop enter anim, pop exit anim, and then we have enter anim and exit anim. And each one of these fragments inside of main fragment will all have the same animations. So I'm going to copy that, paste it in here, copy that, and paste it also in here. So now what is the difference between the pop animations and the non-pop animations? The pop ones refer to what happens when you navigate backwards, or in other words, when you pop the backstack. So for those of you who are already familiar with fragments, you know that when you navigate backwards, you call the method pop backstack to initiate that navigation. So that's all these are. Basically the ones without pop are for navigating without popping the backstack, so navigating forward basically. And then the pop ones are for navigating backwards when you're actually popping the backstack. And I'm going to show you an example. So let's just run this first of all without me changing anything, and let's take a look at these animations and see what they look like. All right, so I'm just going to go to view transactions. So notice I was sliding into the right, and then if I navigate backwards, I have there's two animations going both ways. There's one for the transition for this fragment out of view, and then there's a transition for the new fragment into view. So that's what which one is it? That's what these two are doing. There's one on the fragment leaving the view, and there's one on the fragment coming into the view. So the same thing happens when you navigate back. There's one going out of view and there's one coming into view. So those two different animations are being called. So let's get rid of one of them and see what happens. So I'm going to get rid of the slide out to the right animation, and we'll see how that affects things. All right, so view transactions. So I expect nothing to change on the way in, but then when I go out, notice there was no slide in when this one was leaving. So watch it. It just disappears, and then this one slides into view. So it's missing an animation. There's two animations happening on every transition, and one of them is clearly missing right there. The important thing is that it's happening when I'm navigating back, because I removed that pop exit animation. So when it's exiting, nothing is happening. It's just disappearing. So the same thing would happen if I remove the enter to the left one. So let's run that and take a look at the changes. So again, going into view should be fine, but then going backwards, there's nothing. There's no animation for this coming into view, and there's no animation for the other fragment going out of view. So that's the difference between the pop ones and the ones without pop. So I think now it should be pretty clear to you. All right, so now let's work on the other fragments. So I'm going to scroll down, and we want to find anyone that has an action. We're looking for all of the fragments that have actions, because those need to have animations added to them. And looks like something's wrong with this action. I think I accidentally deleted the destination off camera when I was messing around with this. So I need to make sure to add this destination back to choose recipient fragment, but yours should be fine. I did this off camera. So choose recipient fragment to specify amount fragment. All right, so now let's add these animations. So the first one is pop enter anim, and that's going to be a slide in to the left. So always when you're entering, you're sliding in. You can kind of remember it that way. Now I want to do pop exit anim. This is going to be a slide out, right? So entering is slide in, exiting is slide out. That's pretty much how it goes. Now enter anim is going to be a slide in to the right, and the exit anim will be slide out to the left. So that's going to be our animations for the action choose recipient fragment to specify amount fragment. Next is the view balance one, or it doesn't really matter actually. There's no particular order you need to go in. This one doesn't need one because there's no action, there's no transition. That's going to be the last fragment that we look at. The next one here as we come down the line is specify amount fragment, and we do have an action in here. So let's go in here and write in those animations. So pop enter anim, that's going to be a slide in to the left. Then we have the pop exit anim, that's going to be a slide out to the right. We have the enter anim, we're sliding in from the right. And then the exit anim, that's going to be a slide out left. So again, the same pattern. Enter is in, exit is out, and they're just basically opposites of one another. view balance fragment does not have one, wherever that is right here. There's no action. There's no action in view transaction fragment. So we should be done. We've gone through all the actions necessary. Every action now has an animation. So let's run it now and take a look at all the animations and just confirm that everything's working correctly. All right, so here we have the app on the screen. View transactions, that's good. Send some money. Next. Oh, it looks like we got a crash there. So something is not correct. Looks like the OnClick method, illegal argument exception. Oh, I might have changed when I just changed that, the destination. So that was in choose recipient fragment. So I want to go down to choose recipient fragment, which is here, which is the, yeah, so it looks like I did something wrong here. Choose recipient fragment to specify amount fragment. I gave this, I did this wrong. I don't know what I was doing there. I need to reference the fragment that it's going to, not the ID of the action. So ID, and this is going to specify amount fragment. There we go. So pressing play and pressing OK. I'm not sure what I did when I was testing to change that. I think I just accidentally deleted it. So anyway, there we have the app running now. Let's go to send some money. Type a name in, go to next. There's that transition. Type in some amount, doesn't matter. Send, there's that transition. Now let's check the back and back. Looks good. Let's check the cancel button. Looks good. View balance looks good. So there are all of our animations for our app. The next thing I want to talk about requires another demonstration, I think, to explain correctly. So on the screen here, I have one of my other courses, which it's the Dagger 2 course that I made. It's available on my website. If you just go to codingwithmitch.com/courses, you can scroll down and there's the Dagger 2.2 course. It's free if you want to watch it. Just kind of a heads up of what I'm going to be referring to. So whenever you build Android applications, it's very common to have a login screen. You know, almost every app is going to have some kind of login screen. And when you log in, you press login and you get directed to the inside of the application. Chances are, though, actually, it's not chances are, all the time, you never want the user to be able to navigate back to the login screen by pressing the back button. So notice what happened there when I closed the app. The application, or sorry, when I pressed the back button, the application closed. I didn't go back to the login screen because it doesn't make sense that you would go back to the login screen. Once you get access to the app, there should be no way to navigate back to the login screen other than logging out or signing out. So that's kind of the behavior that we want to see with navigation components. So how can you achieve that behavior? Basically, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to clear the backstack given certain circumstances. So if a user logs in, you want to clear the backstack because you don't want them to be able to navigate back to the login screen by pressing that back button. So how can we handle this with navigation components is now the question. Well, they actually have a number of conveniences. They've already thought of this ahead of time, obviously, because it's an addition to the previous way of navigating. So they're trying to solve all of these kind of problems. And I think it's really cool what they've done. So I'm just going to spend kind of a few minutes talking a little bit about it. The application that sorry, I'm just fixing my mic here. The application that we're building in this demo doesn't really fit all of the things that you can do with this, but I'll talk about kind of one that we can definitely do. So the first thing is the one they describe in the first paragraph here. Basically it says when you navigate from a login screen, you don't want the users to be able to press the back button and get back to that login screen. And I have another app running here that I can give you a little bit of a demo. This is from my Dagger course, my free Dagger course on my website. If you're curious, you can go to codingwithmitch.com/courses and go to Dagger 2.2 on Android. That's what this app is going to be right here. But anyway, so say you log in, you click the login button, you get access to the application. When you press the back button, you want the app to close at that point. You don't want them to be able to navigate to the login screen unless they log out and they re-log in. So that's kind of the thing that the navigation components documentation was talking about right here. You want to essentially clear the backstack when you navigate in those scenarios. So how can you do this? How can I do this in my app? Well, there's two attributes that they talk about here: PopUpTo and PopUpToInclusive. PopUpTo describes, it's an attribute that describes what you want to happen when they press the back button. And PopUpToInclusive is a true or false Boolean. If it's true, that means clear everything, including the thing that you're navigating to, so including the fragment that you're navigating to. and then false is just leave it as it is, obviously. So what how do we do this in our application? Well, we don't have like an app, we don't have a login screen or anything to demo, but I want to show you something so that you can kind of see an example. So in main fragment, suppose we were going from choose recipient, or we're going from main fragment to choose recipient fragment, and I wanted to do pop up to, and I'm popping up to main fragment. This is going to seem weird, and I want to do pop up to inclusive set equal to true. So what I'm pretending here is that main fragment is the login screen, and when I navigate to the next fragment, which is choose recipient fragment, I want to clear the backstack so that when I press the back button, the app closes and I don't get to navigate back to main fragment. So let's run this, and I just want to show you. Obviously, keep in mind, this isn't real. There's no login screen here, so it's just a demo. So I have pop up to main fragment, which is the fragment that I'm navigating from, and pop up to inclusive set to true. So that takes me to send recipient or choose recipient fragment like it did before. But now if I press the back button, the app closes. So that's what you would want to happen if main fragment was a login screen. So that's those are the two things that you would want to do in the case of a login screen. Now, of course, that's kind of only one of the scenarios that you could have. The other scenario that they describe here in the documentation is what happens if you have circular navigation. So if you're going from fragment A to fragment B to fragment C, and you can navigate from C to A. So the destination in C could go to A, or if you press the back button, you want to get navigated back to B. And the example here is actually pretty cool. They paint a picture and they say, what if you navigated from A, B, C, A, and so on. So that would have repetition. And to avoid repetition, you can specify pop up to and pop up to inclusive to specify kind of the behavior that you want. So I encourage you to take a look at the docs here and just kind of read through this example and really think about what they're saying here. Obviously, it doesn't fit really within the video that we're doing in this course, but I wanted to make sure I showed you, in this video, I wanted to make sure I showed you the login screen thing, because that's probably the most common scenario that you'll run into. Pretty much every app has a login screen. So if you're logging in, you want to pop up to the login screen that you have and then pop up to inclusive so that when you log in and you press the back button, the app goes to the background. The next thing that we're going to work on is sending data through the bundle. So if we look at our app again, whoops, that was the wrong one. If we look at our app again, if you go to send money, remember here we need to enter a name to somebody who is going to receive some money. Then when I click next, I'm taken to the next fragment where we would enter a value of money to send them. And then finally in the last fragment, it'll say the amount that they got sent and then the username. So that username needs to get carried, or the name needs to get carried all the way from this fragment to this fragment and then to the end, and the money gets carried from this fragment to the end. So a couple of things that we need to do here. And the first step is I want to build actually a helper class, because when you're sending money, when you're dealing with money, you need to have the best data structure to store it is using a big decimal. So I'm going to create a new class for handling the money that we send through the bundle. So I'm going to create a new Java class. This is just going to be called money. Whoops, I forgot that we're doing Kotlin. We're not doing Java. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to create a new Kotlin class. So right click, go to new Kotlin file. This is going to be called money, and this is going to be a data class for holding a big decimal value, because by default big decimal values cannot get sent through the bundle. We are going to need to create a helper class. That's why I'm creating this money class, and I'm going to put a big decimal value into it, and then we're going to implement the parsable class so that the money class can get sent through the bundle. So I'm doing @parcelize, and now I'm going to create that class. So data class, this is going to be called money. It's going to take one value for the amount. It's going to be a big decimal value, and it's going to be parcelable. So :parcelable. And that's all I need to do. This is a warning. I don't think this actually does anything. I remember I read up on this before. I think it's fine. Like, having this warning is fine. It doesn't do anything. I can't remember exactly why it's fine and why it shows, but it's fine. But you could Google it, like Google parcelable implementation Kotlin on a data class, and Google this error, and I'm pretty sure it shows up as nothing. So check that out. But we're going to leave this the way it is. So now that we have this money class, we can go to our navigation graph and we can define the arguments that we're going to be sending to the various fragments. Actually, sending wasn't a really good way to put it, because when you define the arguments in the navigation graph, actually what you're doing is you're specifying you want to specify it in the fragment on the receiving end. So the receiving end being specify amount fragment, and also that'll be confirmation fragment. Those are the two ones that are receiving data through the bundle. Because this is select recipient fragment. Nothing is being received here. It's being sent to select or specify amount fragment, and then that's being sent to confirmation fragment. So when you're working with the navigation graph and you're sending things through the bundle, just remember you always want to define arguments on the receiving end. So specify amount fragment is the first one that'll be receiving an argument. So I want to create an argument and give it a name. This name can be recipient, and I can give it a default value, and I'm just going to give it a default value of none. So you can search these argument default values, the default value types, and you can also use safe arguments like I described at the beginning of this video. So you can define the type of argument, but we're not using safe arguments in this video, but you can check them out in the documentation. Let's see here. If you just browse here, look for safe args, you can search that, and they're somewhere in here. I don't want to look for them, but we looked at them at the beginning of the video. Next is confirmation fragment. So this is the other one that's going to be receiving some arguments. So I'm going to change this tag so that I can put some things inside here. So the first argument that it's going to be receiving is again that recipient. I'm going to give it a default value of none again, so exactly the same. And then the second argument that it's going to be receiving is that money. So that money amount that's coming from the choose amount fragment. So it'll be called amount, and the arg type is going to be com coding with Mitch dot navigation components example. So I'm just referencing the package, and I'm referencing that money class that I just created. So that's just this right here. You could just copy the package to make sure that you don't make a mistake, and paste that in here. And that'll reference that money class, because that's what we're going to be passing through the bundle, because we've made it parseable now. Okay, so next let's go into choose recipient fragment, and let's get, why is this giving me an error? The next button says, I don't think that should give me an error. I'm just going to rebuild quickly, because that is definitely a button ID. I'm not sure what's going on there. There we go. After a rebuild, that error went away. Okay, so now we need to get the recipient and from the text view that's inside of the layout, and we need to send this through a bundle. So I'm going to come into my NavController here, and I'm going to write an if statement first of all. So if text utils dot is empty, I'm checking to make sure that the input is actually not empty. So input recipient dot text dot toString. If that is not empty, then I know that we actually have a recipient in there and we can use it. So in that case, I'm going to create a bundle. So value bundle equals bundle of, this is a handy Kotlin thing, bundle of, I need to give it a name, which is recipient. That's the name that we gave it in the navigation graph. Remember, we gave that recipient argument name right there. And now I can reference that value. So recipient to input recipient dot text dot toString. So I'm adding that. That's a very simple way to add things to a bundle. Now I just need to add this to the navigate action. So the first parameter here is the place that it's navigating to, and then the second parameter can be that bundle that I just created right here. And of course I need to cut that and put it inside of our if statement. So if the recipient is not empty, then it will attach that recipient to the bundle and send it into our fragment. So now let's take a look at the next fragment. So the next one is specify amount fragment. And there's a couple things going on here. Number one is we need to retrieve that recipient from the bundle. So I'm going to say recipient string, it can be null equals null. But actually, instead of setting these null, I could actually just set them as late init variables and get rid of this null value here. That basically what that means is I'm going to initialize these right away, so I don't have to set them to nullable and set them to null as a global. So right away, in the onViewCreated, this is going to be initialized, so it's going to be late initialized. And the recipient is going to be the same thing, because right away I'm going to import the onCreate method. So Control O, and I'm looking for onCreate. And inside of onCreate, I'm going to get that recipient value. So recipient equals arguments, can't be null, get string, and I want to reference that recipient string that we're sending through the bundle. This null check we should be able to ignore, because if we look at our code here, there's no way that this is going to get passed if there's an empty string. So here, no matter what, we're not worried about it being null. Now we're going to come down into onViewCreated and do a little bit of setup here. So if we take a look at the layout, if we take a look at specify amount fragment, or the layout for specify amount fragment, at the top here, I want to display a message that says sending money to whoever that they chose from the previous fragment. So that's what we're going to do in onViewCreated first of all here. So I want to do value message equals sending money to the recipient. That's going to be the message. Then I can just reference the view, find view by ID. It's going to be a text view. And this is r.id.recipient. And I want to set that text to the message that I just wrote. So value message. That's going to display that text above the button and above the amount where you enter in the amount. Now inside of the send button, we want to make this very similar to what we did in the previous fragment. So I want to do if not empty. So text utils dot is empty, input amount. If the input amount to string is not empty, then we know that we actually have an amount that we can send. So value amount equals a money object that's going to take in a big decimal value. So big decimal input amount text dot to string. So there's going to be our amount. The next thing is going to be the bundle. So value bundle equals bundle of. So same thing we did before, but now we have two values to put in our bundle. So this is another really cool Kotlin thing. I can do recipient to recipient and then amount to amount. And so that'll bundle both of those things together. And now I can take my NavController and I can write the ID of the fragment that I'm navigating to just like before, but we want to pass that bundle as a second parameter. So that should be good. Otherwise, I could actually do an else statement here, just letting them know. So I could do toast.makeText, reference the activity context, and do enter an amount, just letting them know that they actually need to enter something. Otherwise, they won't be able to go to the next screen. So let's just do length short and then show that. And I can actually add this to the previous fragment too. So if I go to choose recipient fragment, right here I can add that same else statement, except for I can say enter someone to send, a recipient. So there we go. Okay, so now that will send the amount to the final fragment. So now let's work on that final fragment, which is confirmation fragment. So we need to receive all of that information in confirmation fragment. So we have two parameters that we're receiving at the top here. Again, we can do late init. We'll have recipient. It's going to be a string value. And late init, this is going to be money. It's going to be a money value. And I need to Control O and insert on create again. So on create, there it is right there. And then we can get those two values. So recipient equals arguments, not null, get string, recipient, and the next one will be money equals arguments, not null, get parcelable, not parcelable array, just get parcelable, and that's going to be that amount. And those will be our two values. The last thing is just setting those in onViewCreated. So Control O, onViewCreated, put that in there. I'm going to give myself a little more room here. And in onViewCreated, I can get value amount equals money, not null amount, value confirmation message equals you have sent an amount, so $amount to the recipient. And then view, find view by ID, that's going to be a text view for displaying that. Import that r.id.confirmation message text equals confirmation message. And that should do it. so that should be our complete application. Just to kind of review what happened there, remember, if you're sending things through the bundle, you want to declare an argument in the navigation graph on the receiving fragment. So the only two fragments that are receiving data are confirmation fragment, which is what we just looked at right there, and specify amount fragment, which was this one right here. Choose recipient fragment is sending data, but it's not receiving anything, so we don't need to declare an argument there. So inside choose recipient fragment, we're just checking to see if that text view is null. Then we attach it to the bundle and send it using the navigate method right here as the second property, as the second parameter as input. Then in specify amount fragment, we're inserting the onCreate method, getting that recipient, declaring a message to display that recipient above the text view. I'll actually run this so we can look at it kind of as we're running through this. And then the next thing is just a repetition of what we already did. We're creating that money object by inputting a big decimal value, bundling everything together, and then sending it to the final fragment where it's being displayed using onViewCreated through a message. So now let's take a look. Let's send some money. Let's give him a name of Mitch. Go to next, sending money to Mitch. Remember, that's where we're setting that message right here, sending money to the recipient, which is being displayed. Now I'm going to add an amount here, just say 56. Go to send. You have sent 56 to Mitch. There should be a $sign there, but that's about it. You have sent $sign. I think that would be fine to Mitch. Let's run that and just take a look. I'm not sure if that's going to cause a problem having them next to each other. Not sure if that notation's okay. I'm still getting used to Kotlin, but it's slowly kind of coming together for me. So next and 55, sending $55 to Mitch. So there you have it, people. There you have a navigation components example. Of course, this is a pretty simple example, but I showcased a lot of very common things that you need to see, you know, from navigating to a bunch of different fragments, to creating a navigation graph, sending things through the bundle, handling the backstack, the different animations, popping, regular animations, what happens if you use PopUpTo and PopUpInclusive. So that's shown in the documentations somewhere. I lost it, but anyway, it's there. We looked at it. PopUpTo and PopUpToInclusive being true or false. How to handle a login screen. So if you have an app where you don't want people to be able to navigate back, we covered a lot of stuff. So again, simple example, but hopefully you found this helpful, and let me know below if you want to see me use navigation components in more of my stuff. I'm thinking about adding it to everything, since I'm going to be using Kotlin moving forward now too. I'm going to be using probably navigation for any kind of fragment navigation stuff that I'll be doing. So I hope you liked the video. Hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.